Hello, my friends. This is an image that I created for my most recent episode of Natalie Areola is Murdering the Classics, which was on Man Ray. So this image was very much inspired by Man Ray's work. He played a lot with solarization. I accidentally stumbled across this technique in the darkroom and it became a mainstay of his work. So I am trying to create that solarized look in this image, but I'm also combining it with a little bit of an extra surreal element by adding this bird here in the mirror that I'm holding in front of my face. And I've had a few people just asking how I went about editing this image, so I figured I'd go ahead and do an editing breakdown. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. I'm just going to close this by hitting Command W. I'm going to go up here to File, Open, and I'm going to open up my original subject and my original bird image. Okay, so this is the original shot of our subject. And the first thing I'm going to want to do to achieve my solarized look is to turn this image to black and white. So typically with solarized images, they're going to be in black and white, though it can be done in color, and I am actually going to employ an element of that in this. But for now, we're going to start by just making our subject image black and white. So I'm going to go over here to my adjustment layers and I'm going to choose the black and white adjustment. If for some reason you don't have this panel open, you can go to Window Adjustments to open that up. And what I am then going to do is just kind of play around with the sliders here. So I kind of want to brighten it up a little bit, and in images like this, there's typically going to be a lot of red and yellow. Skin has a lot of red and yellow in it. So I'm just going to slide these up on the red and the yellow. I'm not really going to mess with the green, the cyan, or the blue too much because there's just not a lot of those colors in this image. But I am going to pull the magentas down a little bit. So this has a pretty subtle effect, but it does affect a little bit like the lip color and things like that. So this is looking pretty good to me for a starting place. So what I'm going to do is, because I know that I'm ready to commit to this, I'm just going to go ahead and merge these layers. So I have this layer selected. I'm just going to hold Shift and click my bottom layer, and then I'm going to hit Command E to merge those. So the next thing I want to do is get started on the solarization. So Photoshop actually has a built-in solarization filter. So you can find that by going up here to Filter, Stylize, Solarize. But I really don't like the effect that this solarization filter has on this image, so I'm not going to use it. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, but I just wanted to show you that so that you know it is there and it is available to you. But I'm going to do more of a custom solarization on this. So I'm going to get a curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to just kind of pull the sliders around here. So essentially, a solarized image is an image where the print or the negative has been re-exposed to light partway through the development process. And this creates a look that is both sort of negative and positive. So if I wanted to, I could just kind of slide both of my shadow and my highlight slider to the opposite ends of the spectrum, and this would essentially make a negative of this image. But I don't want it to be totally negative because it's more of an in-between point that we're looking for. So I'm going to drag this slider for my shadows down a little more, and I'm going to place it maybe around here. So it's just a little below this top line here, so that you can see this is broken up into 4 sort of quadrants here. And then I'm going to slide this one up, and I'm going to bring it to just below this bottom line. And then I'm going to grab another point here in the middle area and just kind of slide it up a little bit. So there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just kind of playing around with this and seeing what I think works for the look that I'm going for. So I'm going to start with this. I don't want to move that too much, but I don't want it. I think I'm just going to put another point here and just pull it out just a little bit. Something like this maybe. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, you can see this looks pretty strange now. It looks very washed out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the blending modes for this layer. So here are our blending modes under this drop down. And so you can kind of scroll through these and just see what the different effects are. But I'm going to use pin light on this. So I'm going to choose the pin light blending mode. And as you can see, it's already giving it more of that sort of solarized appearance here, which is exactly what we want. But it's a little too hazy. So I'm going to grab a levels adjustment layer, and I'm going to bring my black point up so I can get some more contrast in here. So let's bring it somewhere around there. And I'm also going to bring my white point up so that I won't have too dark of an image. I still want some bright whites in there. So around there is good. And then I'm also going to bring down my mid point. So let's go somewhere around there, looks good. So this is actually it for the solarization effect. So that was super easy, and I personally think that this looks really cool, and it has that sort of outlined quality that you see in Man Ray's solarized images. So if you look at his solarizations, you'll see that a lot of times there's sort of this black outline around the image and even some white areas as well, and this image definitely has that. And another thing that it has is just it's subtle. It's not like a crazy solarization effect. It's a fairly subtle one, and that is another thing that you see in a lot of Man Ray's work. Not all of it. Sometimes he definitely goes more crazy with it, but there's a few of his solarizations that I personally really appreciate, and they're typically the more subtle ones. So I think we're good on our solarization. Now we can go ahead and bring our bird into this image. So I'm going to go over here to my bird, and I shot this just under the exact same lighting conditions, and I just want to select him. So if I wanted to make this easier on myself, I would have brought a white background behind my bird, and that would have made him a lot easier to select. However, it's not going to be a huge deal for us because this is going to be a pretty simple selection. It doesn't need to be super precise because we're taking him off of a gray background and we're going to be putting him in the mirror here, which is also gray. So we're not going to have to worry too much about a super precise selection. Also, we only really need the top portion of him because as you may have noted in the final image, we don't see all of him. We're really just seeing the top portion of his body and his head. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose Select Subject. Now, if you don't have this option, you're using an older version of Photoshop, you can just use the quick selection tool. So you can get that by coming over here and choosing it from the menu, or you can also hit W, and that will bring the quick selection tool up. And then what you would do here, I'm just gonna hit Command D to deselect. You would just drag that around your bird and select him this way. And this is a perfectly reasonable way to select him as well. And then either way, whether you've done it like this or by choosing Select Subject, you want to zoom in and make sure that there aren't any areas that you've missed. Just kind of refine things a little bit here. So we're just going to go around. I want to make sure I'm getting the feathers in there. And let's see, is that gonna mess me up? No. Okay, sometimes when you're doing this, the quick selection tool will overcompensate for whatever you're doing and kind of select everything. So you just have to be a little careful. But I think that that's already looking pretty close to good. I just want to get this wing here. And I don't really need to worry about the bottom of the image, so I'm just not going to even bother with that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the select and mask dialog. So there's different ways you can do that, but if you have a selection tool like the quick selection tool open, you can just click here at the top, select and mask. And now this will allow me to refine this selection a little bit. So I'm actually going to grab my pen for my tablet to do this, and I'm going to choose this refine edge brush here. And I'm just going to make it a little bigger. So I'm doing that by hitting the right bracket key. So the right bracket key will make your brush bigger. The left bracket key will make it smaller. And I'm just going to drag it around the outer area of the feathers here so I can get a better selection on the feathers. So anytime you're selecting something like feathers or hair on a human subject is also an example of when this brush will really come in handy for you. So we're just going to keep dragging this around. So I will probably just speed this up as I do this. Okay, so I've got that done. Now I'm actually going to grab my just regular brush. So this behaves just like your quick selection tool would, but it's more like a brush is basically what it's like. So if you're painting on a mask, you paint in black to remove areas and in white to add areas, and this is kind of the same thing, but it's just a plus and minus. So right now it's in the adding mode, which you can see right here. So I want to just clean up the beak a little bit, and I'm going to harden my brush when I do that. So I'm going to hold Control Option, and I'm going to scroll down with my pen tool, which actually I already was pretty hard, so I don't want it quite that hard. I'm going to scroll up to soften it a little bit. And then I'm just going to clean up this edge here on my bird. And then I'm going to hold Option to subtract anything that I don't want. So I'm going to do the same on the other side here. Just kind of getting rid of some areas where it's selected a little too much of the background. And I don't have to really be super precise here because, again, this is a gray background that he's on, and we're going to be bringing him into a gray background, so it's not going to be a big deal. And I'm just going to check around and make sure that when I was using the Refine Edge brush that it didn't go too far and remove anything that I don't want removed. So there's like a little feather here. And there's a little bit here on his wing where maybe it just went a little too far. And again, I don't need to go too far down on this because I'm not going to see a lot of this in the final image. And here on his breast area, I'll add a little bit of that back. And then I'm actually going to remove, so I'm holding Option again to remove a little bit there. Okay, that should be good. And remove a little bit more right here. And then I'm going to add this feather back in. And there's one right here that I want to add back in. And I'm going to soften my brush, so I'm going to hold Control Option again, and I'm going to scroll up with my pen, maybe around there. And I just want to grab some of these tiny feathers here under his chin. And then I'm going to try my Refine Edge brush one more time on this area, but just make it really small. Let's see if I can't get that a little better. Okay, so I'm liking that better. All right, and that is it. So I think he looks pretty good, and we're just gonna click OK. And now we have our bird. So I'm just gonna hit Command C to copy him. I'm gonna come back over here and I'm gonna hit Command V to paste him. And then what I'm gonna do is I am going to turn him into a smart object. So I have the layer that he's on selected. I'm gonna right click on that and I'm gonna choose Convert to Smart Object. And I'm actually gonna have two of the bird, one layered on top of the other. So I'm gonna hit Command J to copy this. And this top one I'm gonna call Color. And this bottom one I'm gonna call Black and White. So B and W. And I'm gonna turn off the color one for right now. And so I want to make him black and white on this layer. So I'm gonna go up here to Image, Adjustments, and choose Black and White. And I'm just going to do the same thing that I did the last time and just play with the sliders here a bit and kind of choose a look that I think works. So some of these adjustments are going to be pretty subtle. When we get into the blues, we're really going to start seeing a change on him because he's got a lot of blue in him. So yeah, see, here we go. You can really see that's brightening him up quite a bit. I want to get as much contrast on him as I can. I'm going to pull that down actually, I think. And I don't think the magenta is really going to do much, so I'm just going to leave that alone. And I'm going to click OK. And so you can see that because he's a smart object, it's applying the black and white adjustment as a smart filter, which means that I can remove it and I can also go back into this and change it later if I wanted to. Now I'm going to solarize him, but I'm actually just going to use the Photoshop filter to do this. So I'm going to go up to Filter, Stylize, Solarize. And that's what we're going to do for that layer. So now we're going to turn on our color layer. And I am going to solarize this one as well, but I'm going to keep it in color. So I'm just going to go Filter again, Stylize, Solarize. And I think this has kind of an interesting effect. So I am going to use that here. And then the final thing that I'm going to do on that is I'm going to change the blending mode. So I'm going to go here again to this drop down and I'm going to change the blending mode to color dodge because I think this just gives it a really interesting appearance. So we're good with that. I have this layer selected. I'm going to hold Shift and select the other bird layer. Then I'm going to hit Command G to group those and I'm going to call these bird. And then I'm going to open that back up. So what I need to do is place my bird inside my mirror, right? So I need to make a mask for that. So I'm going to go back to my background layer and I'm going to select the mirror. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here and I'm going to hit W. I think I might actually do the magic wand. So I'll grab that and yeah, that's perfect. So when you use the magic wand, it's good for like if you have like a solid color because it'll just immediately grab everything. And as you can see, it definitely did that here. So I'm going to go up here again to select and mask. We can also hit Option Command R to get to the select and mask dialog. And then we're just going to refine this a tiny bit. So I'm going to grab this brush because you can see it grabbed a tiny bit of the mirror here, so I'm going to hold Option and just drag that along there to get rid of that. Let's do that a couple times there. Okay, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but that should be just fine. And then I'm going to go over here to Global Refinements. I'm going to smooth it by 30. I'm going to feather it by about 4, and then I'm going to add 30% contrast. And that should be just fine. I'm just going to click OK. So now I want to add this as a layer mask to my bird. So I'm going to turn my birds back on, and I'm just going to go to my first bird layer here, and I'm going to hit this button here to add a layer mask. And now I'll want to do the same on the other bird. So what I can do for that is I can hold Option, click on this layer mask, and drag it down to the other layer. And now they both have that same layer mask on them. And so you can see now we can only see the bird inside the mirror, which is exactly what we want. So what we're going to do now is transform this. So I don't want to do it with the bird locked to his layer mask. The reason for this is, here I'm just going to select both birds here, and I'm going to hit V for my move tool. So what'll happen if I keep the layer mask locked, when I move the bird, all of a sudden he looks weird, right? Because he's taking that layer mask with him wherever he goes. So I'm going to hit Command Z. So instead, I'm going to unlock the bird layer from the layer mask on both of those. So now when I move him, he moves inside the mirror, and that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to hit Command T to transform him. So first I just want to start out by making him smaller because he's definitely too big. And then getting him around about where I might position him. Then I'm going to take this central point and I'm going to drag it up to somewhere around here. And I'm going to hold Option and then transform him a little more. And what that does is it just makes that the central point around which the transformation will occur. So you can kind of keep that object in the same position. And I think that's already looking pretty close to how we want this. I think I'm actually probably happy with him right there. Should he be a tiny bit smaller? Maybe just a tiny bit smaller. Okay, so I think that looks great. So the last thing we're going to do on the bird, I'm just going to zoom in here. So this already looks pretty cool, but the thing that I think is interesting about doing this layer with the color solarization and then adding the color dodge blend mode is that it gives it almost like that 3D look of an image that's meant to be looked at through 3D glasses, or even like sort of a holographic image or something like that. So what I want to do to kind of enhance that effect is I'm going to make this color layer a little bit larger than the black and white layer beneath it. So let's hit Command T to do that. I'm going to pull that central point up, and then I'm going to hold Option, and I'm just going to make it just a little bit bigger. And we'll move it out just a tiny bit. Let's see. I think right about there is perfect. Okay, so I think this looks really cool and just creates a very interesting effect. And that's pretty much it for this image. The only other things that I really did here was a little tiny bit of cleanup. So I'm actually going to create a merged copy of everything now. So I'll hit Shift, Option, Command, and E to merge everything together. And then I'm going to zoom back in. I'm going to get my stamp tool. So I'm grabbing my pen for my pen tablet again, and I'm hitting S to get my stamp. And I'm just going to make it a little bigger. And I just want to clean some of this up because there's like kind of this weird haze back here that I don't really like. I want to make sure that it is a soft brush. So I'll hit Control Option and drag up, and it looks like it is already at 0% hardness. So we're good on that. And make it a little smaller. And then when you're using the stamp tool, you hold Option to sample, and then you just paint wherever you want to go over. And just going to carefully do this. I don't want to get too close because I don't want to remove the detail of the hair there. Okay, so I'm just going to go around the image and check for anything that I think needs to be removed. There's a few errant hairs here that I'm just gonna get rid of. It's good to have flyaways because you want it to look real, and if you get rid of all the flyaways, it's not going to look real. But some of these flyaways on the top of my head are getting a little crazy, so I'm going to remove those. Oops, kind of like painted that back in. Okay, so we're just gonna remove those flyaways. Not all of them, still want some, but just cleaning it up a little bit. Okay, so that looks a lot better. Now I might check just to see if there's anything here that like on the bird that needs to be cleaned up. So I'm gonna hit J for my spot healing brush, and I would like to get rid of a little bit of these kind of like bumps on his beak. That one's being stubborn. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that looks pretty good. There's a tiny spot on the mirror that's bothering me. I already retouched my subject, so I don't really need to worry about that. There's a tiny little spot here that maybe I'll get rid of. Okay, that's better. And I think that should be it. Everything else looks really good. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do on this is just a little bit of sharpening. So I'm not a person who likes crazy sharp images. I know some people do, but it's not my thing. So I do pretty simple steps for my sharpening. So basically what I do is, what I could do is, since this is kind of a retouching layer, I'll just rename this RT. And then I'll hit Command J and I'll rename this Sharp. So Command J just duplicates your layer. And we're gonna go up here to Filter, we're gonna go to Other, we're gonna go to High Pass. And I'm just gonna leave it at 10 radius, click OK. And then I'm gonna change the blend mode to Soft Light. So this just sharpens the image. So I'll show you the before and after. So this is before, and this is after. And if we zoom in, we can see it a little better. So this is before, and this is after. So again, I don't like my images super duper sharp, so I'm actually going to lower the opacity on this layer a little bit. So if you have your move tool selected, which I already do, but if you don't, you can hit V to select it, and you have the layer selected that you want to change the opacity on, you can just use the numbers on your keypad. So if I hit 5, that'll make it 50% opacity. And I think that is more what I'm going for. And that's it. So that it's actually a very simple edit for this image, but I think it's a very effective image. I hope this was helpful to you. If you have any further questions about what I'm doing here, I'd love to address those for you in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video.